Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4AS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well. And of course, our other co-host, Kareem the Dream, our resident AI explorer. How are you going today, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I'm gonna say I fell into a bit of a rabbit hole with this topic that we were discussing, and somehow I still feel grossly underqualified to discuss any of it.
I think most people are grossly underqualified to discuss such
it is
a
a
topic.
juicy topic, though.
Yeah, it is juicy.
It's I feel like it could go a number of ways. So I'm keen to see how this conversation unfolds. I might shout out your video actually, which was talking about the network state, because it helped me sort of understand that at a surface level, what are the major issues with it? Like where is it going? Kind of how does this thing sort of come off the rail? But whereas I tend to be the naive optimist with these things and be like, yeah, that sounds mad. Let's do that.
And look, in theory, it sounds fun. But it's where it's coming from, which is suspect and requires further consideration, in my perspective.
Yeah, fair enough. Continue.
Then again, you can always trust the AI expert to prompt us on what the discussion is for today, which is, of course, as you've said multiple times, the network state. So I think what's a great way to kind of frame around, because obviously the Trump presidency is underway in 2025, and I guess Project 2025 is underway, and obviously the other week, the whole thing about, we want to buy Greenland, and then the Danish people were like, yeah, Greenland's not for sale. But in all of that, because obviously people have noticed everything that's happening, I guess, in the news, but under the surface of that, even though it sounds on the surface like, a very typical conspiracy theory, the reason why Trump picked out Greenland is because it's one of these network states. And to be completely honest, Mr. E, you've been our network state correspondent on all of this. I'm trying to uncover all of this stuff on all of your streams.
Yeah,
how about we start with the definition? I'm hoping you've got one lined up for us.
I don't. I wish I could define such a strange and rather scary topic easily.
Do you want me to ask AI to give us a?
Yeah, why not? Let's get a scientific one, and then we'll pick it apart. How about that?
All right, I'm asking Gemini 2.5 Pro Preview 0325. In case anyone
the one, the only.
Give it a chance to think. So that's how the models work these days. So then I'll just read out word for word what it says.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't give me a massive essay on what it is, so I won't be sitting here reading for
Here's a little teaser for you while we wait, okay? Network state is a idea that has been developed by our tech bros. So our techno-feudal overlords from Silicon Valley, who have libertarian fantasies of bringing about new societies in their own image. So they want to recreate society because they are multi-billionaires and they have the resources to do it. So, when you're that rich, you say to yourself at one point, hey, I must be absolutely amazing. I must be God's gift to the human race because, who else has hundreds of billions of dollars at their disposal, basically to be used by private individuals and like everybody else, as the little ants that they are, should live in societies of my creation. And with that type of mindset, you come up with something like the network state. And I hope that like paints a nice little picture for you.
Let's just kind of back up a bit there, Mr. Green, because like before we define the network state, if we actually have new listeners tuning in, and this actually might help out Kareem as well, maybe you should define techno-feudalist.
Right. Okay.
Just in case people are approaching this for the first time.
Right. Techno-feudal. Yeah, let's go right back. Okay, so techno-feudalism is an idea that was first coined by Yanis Varoufakis, who is, I guess, quite the well-known leftist economist, intellectual, old-school Marxist, he would describe himself as. And so he wrote a book, I think, in 2021, maybe 2022, that was basically called Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. So he believes that capitalism as a mode of production, so like the basis of the world economy, has actually finished now, and we live in a world which has reverted to a form of feudalism, like what we had before capitalism, you know, the age of kings, like monarchies, all that sort of stuff. That was ruled predominantly by a mode of production where you have a lord who has supreme control over an area, and you have serfs, people who are tied to the land, and they produce value on the land, so they work the land basically, and they pay rent to their lord. And like that is the way that that world works at its core social relation. So its core center relation, how all the value gets created in that society, which everybody lives off, all the, you know, the church and like all of the priests and the different levels of the aristocracy, the knights, the army and the soldiers, all those people feed off whatever value the serfs produce for their lord, and it gets distributed through that system. Now, techno-feudalism is an adaptation of the final development of capitalism, where you have a system of such technological complexity that we now have a network that connects the entire world together through digital means, and you have these tech companies which completely monopolize areas within that digital landscape. And so these are their techno fiefdoms. So like they are the lords in these little techno areas, these digital landscapes, and they control them like a feudal lord would, with absolute control, like an absolute monarch would. And like in this age, the value that is created by the serf, the people that are tied to these digital landscapes, is actually data. And so like people produce data, and like these digital fiefdoms basically help farm data towards these techno-feudalists who now control the entire world economy. So even if you still have capitalists, right, that produce like a car or a book, if you want to produce that, like you can't just like, well, I guess you could, but it's like very rare that you would like only sell it in a bookshop or something like that in the real world. If you really want to sell your book or your car, you need to be online. Like every company now is also, they say, a software company because they have a digital presence. And like the only way to really operate in the landscape now is through somebody else's, like a techno-feudalist, a techno-feudal lord's digital realm where they control everything. So if you go into Facebook Marketplace, as just a really quick example, Mark Zuckerberg not only controls what comes up in front of you in terms of what you can see, he also controls like, you know, how you turn your head and like what like you hear and all that sort of stuff. So like you could be looking for a product, a very particular product, and like if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want you to see it, even if you're in Facebook Marketplace, you don't get to see it. They control everything about that landscape. So like if I went into the real world, into a marketplace, I'd be able to turn my head and look at any product that was on sale kind of thing. But in these digital fiefdoms, these techno-feudalists control absolutely everything. And that goes for the people that are selling too. So if you've got a product and like they don't like you, and like this happens on Amazon, like people will never find your product, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like they control every aspect of the global economy from that end. And so like, there are many critics of this. Okay, like there's not it's not unanimous
It's not
on
universally
the
accepted,
exactly
right?
yeah, it's not unanimous on the left that like we've left capitalism, because I'll tell you there's a lot of lefties out there that are pretty upset to think that like capitalism could have ended and it wasn't them who ended it, like kind of thing. So that's a very quick overview. When I use the word like throwaway techno-feudalist, that's what I mean.
Let me give you the concise the very concise description that Gemini gave me of the network state.
Okay.
And we'll come back to it and sort of how it ties into techno-feudalism and what the argument might be for and against it. So a network state is a concept for a political entity that starts as an online community united by a shared ideology or clear purpose. This community first organizes and coordinates collective action digitally, then aims to crowdfund and acquire physical territory in various locations linked together by the network. The ultimate goal is to gain diplomatic recognition from existing governments, effectively becoming a new type of state founded on the internet rather than by conquering land. So
that's pretty good summary. That's a great summary.
Like Honduras, like Greenland.
From the the very limited research that I've done into it, the kinds of ideas that sort of underpin what like conceptually what the network state is supposed to be about is it's facilitated by technology. So the idea is that we're at a point in time in our technological evolution where we have systems that can facilitate decentralized forms of government, democratized forms of decision making that are facilitated digitally, blockchain-centric currencies that are sort of native to these network states, and the concept sort of states that like when it says united by a shared ideology or clear purpose, the idea is around sort of voluntary exit of people from societies, so that let's say that people are disillusioned with whatever geographical state that they're living with, that they can choose to opt into one of these voluntary societies that's more aligned with whatever their values are or what their shared or common purpose is. So it's meant to sort of start small, not be restricted geographically, like be able to I guess appeal on a global level, and then once it's sort of reached a sufficient like a critical mass point, that's the point in time that they start considering the acquisition of physical territory, because the digital infrastructure that underpins or is necessary in order to run one of these network states requires physical resources, servers, fiber optic cables, land, like that sort of thing. So I think conceptually, one of the ideas that sort of gave rise to the network state is we should be able to like pilot and trial different forms of governance. So we should be able to sort of rapidly iterate. That's coming straight out of Techland. That one, rapid iteration is like one of the principles of software. The development is we try something out, it doesn't work, we change it straight away. So we see what works and what doesn't. We put it out there. If it doesn't work, we ditch it. We move on to the next. So being able to trial different forms of government, trial different technologies in the facilitation of this governance, is my understanding of sort of the conceptual direction that the network state was meant to be headed in.
Yep.
Now, rightly so, you've identified a whole bunch of issues with the network state, and I think that's sort of worth unpacking in way more detail. But I think it's also important to sort of to understand conceptually what the direction was. So
yeah. So like the way that you've described it there, quite diplomatically, if not very neutrally, it makes it sound quite revolutionary. And my gripe with the network state is that it is actually quite a revolutionary way of thinking. And like, you know, it gets under my skin because like I'm a revolutionary, but I'm not a revolutionary of this ilk. And so like the fact that these, you know, multi-billionaires have the resources just to throw at like, you know, experiments with new societies, you know, upsets me because I'm jealous. So let me just frame the conversation.
I love the way you own that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you know, if you gave me billions of dollars, I'd make a new society too. Because, like, you know, to detach yourself from the capitalist system, like, unless you're going to have a social revolution kind of thing, one of the only ways to do that is like to have the monetary wealth to be able to set up a new society from a capitalist, like, starting point and then springboard from there, basically.
Well, no, but you raise a really good point, Mystery, because, like, really going all the way back to some of the beginning episodes we've done, Eric Olin Wright, what you are describing is pretty much escaping capitalism. That he, like, there's like 4 to 5 different ways, he said, of dealing with capitalism. One of them was just simply escaping capitalism. Yeah. And this is as close as you can get in terms of changing a different mode of society by, you know, going to the cabin in the woods.
Yes.
Like, this is the society equivalent of taking your ball and going to live in the cabin in the woods.
Yeah. And this is a chief concept actually in the network state. There's like 2 modes of it. Like there's actually like 2 ways that you can go around producing a network state. And one of those is exiting society or doing it via like your voice. And that is like actually using the existing political apparatus, so like voting and the democratic system, to change society in the interests of a network state. So there's 2 options there. And like the one that we've been talking about more or so far is this exiting society kind of concept. Sorry, Kareem. Sorry.
No, all good. Like from the I guess you can't so much call it research as just sort of interacting with AI and relying on whatever the AI is telling me about the network state, so which could be inherently flawed.
But it's very conceptual. It's very conceptual. So,
but it was telling me that a lot of it is quite reliant on the capitalist framework. So it's not necessarily designed to exit the capitalist framework. Like some of these. Theoretical concepts for network states that could be built could be aligned around, say, global issues like climate change or healthcare, and are designed to I guess, attract talent towards these communities that are specifically focused on solving these issues, that have some type of value to the broader society. And I guess there is some type of exchange of value in that process, which is a part of the capitalist system. So I don't think I don't think they're sort of, you know, necessarily wanting to exit capitalism altogether. And I think, you know, one of the fundamental issues is that in order to establish a network state, you kind of need to rely on capitalist output. In order to get it off the ground.
Kareem, I would actually take it even a step further. I can't, at this point I'm about to make, I can't really claim to it, because really this is a point that you've made, Mystery, is that not only are they relying on capitalism, but I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding how much they rely on the state. Because really, I guess in terms of capitalism and the world economy and how it kind of works, I don't think a lot of libertarians realize how much they rely on the nation state in order for capitalism being, or their profit or their product being able to reproduce itself, because you have a nation state that's actually backing you. So, this is a point you've made, Mystery, where it's like, okay, so these network states, they go to Honduras or they go to Greenland and they set up their little paradise where, they don't have to pay tax and they all come collectively together. What happens if, they go to Honduras or Greenland and then an opposing force like Russia or China goes like, okay, thanks for that. I'm just going to take everything you're worth.
Yeah. So they need like some type of like military protection, and that was one of the things that came up in my chats was like one like the amount of opposition that network states would face in terms of trying to acquire sovereignty from existing states, and how that would sort of play out on a geopolitical level. So I think, like it seems to be the direction is that there is this desire for sovereignty, but like where I'd pull you up on is it might not, conceptually it might not be a desire for absolute sovereignty. So I think the point in time that you're sort of looking for to set up shop in Greenland, I don't actually know who runs Greenland or what that looks like as a nation state as is.
Well, yeah. I guess maybe I can at least comment on that, and I guess this entirely is based on whether how accurate Borgen is, but like my at least my understanding is that the Danes, they are like, they're kind of caretakers for Greenland. Like Greenland is kind of a part of it. That's
so it doesn't have like an independent sort of government, or it's sort of it's like a bit like Antarctica. Like it's maybe not Antarctica.
Like it's provided that like I don't know between 2010 to now whether things have progressed in its own entity, but like I think at least up until the 2010s, the Danes were kind of had like a caretaker role for them. Like I think they had their own like governor or like prime minister of sorts, but they kind of reported to the Danish. So I don't know whether that's progressed since the 2010s.
So they're getting some level of support from the Danish, so they're not fully independent. So
no. They define themselves as an autonomous territory within the sovereign nation of Denmark.
Okay, but they're reliant on
Denmark.
On external support because for whatever reason they're unable to sort of like support themselves.
Like hence why when Donald Trump was saying all that stuff about Greenland, the Prime Minister came out and is like, Mr. Trump, Greenland's not for sale.
So like, but I think it's a useful reference point for the idea of the network state in terms of like what one of the concepts behind it is varying degrees of sovereignty. So as opposed to distinguishing between this is a state, this is not a state, asking the question, to what degree is this state autonomous? What do they have control over? What do they have sort of independent control over? And we're willing to see that. What type of support might they need, for which theoretically you can impose whatever conditions you want if you're going to offer that support. That just comes with the territory. So
I think it would be good, like for the listeners, I guess, just to give, I don't know, like a little bit more broader of a definition of kind of the network state. So the network state, I guess, it is very conceptual, and like one of the kind of founding thinkers, if not the main or central thinker in this concept, is a gentleman by the name of Balaji Srinivasan, who is like a Silicon Valley tech bro. He's another, billionaire, made like, his fortunes doing stuff, and now is like basically looking at ways to kind of like restructure society, basically. And like these men, these tech bros, for the most part, are libertarian. So a libertarian ideal, like a very quick summary, it's obviously a lot more complex than this, but like libertarians or libertarianism is like a political ideology, and like, you know, it seeks kind of primarily to ensure, you know, the rights of the individual, and make sure that, like, in any situation, the rights of the individual are maintained, and like any actions between individuals are done in such a way of non-aggression, so nobody imposes themselves on any other. So that's like at the individual level. At the state level, at the society-wide level, libertarians are, you know, well known for their ideas about like the state and the market. So like libertarians do not believe in the state at all. They believe it should have basically like a very minimal, if possible, a non-existent role in society, and everything should be worked out by like the market basically and private interests. So like, you know, even down to like if you lived along a street with other people, like the street shouldn't be, you know, owned. It's not a public roadway. If everybody uses this street, then like you get together with all the other people that live on this street and you own that road privately. And if like, you know, you've got costs associated with that road, every time someone drives down it, then charge them $1. And like, you know, that's how society will structure itself. So like it is like, I would say, and this is just my opinion, you can make up your own, go and research it. It's a pretty radical idea for how to structure a society. And like this only comes about as a result of like, you know, post-industrial revolution society, capitalist society, where you have like, you know, things set up in a certain way. You have technological means to be able to structure society in a way where like, you know, you could really do away with the state apparatus. And so like developing from that line of thinking, okay, of like, you know, basically having the private sector run society, and society only being run by like, you know, in the name of private interests, then like you have this development from the tech bros, who I have, you know, said for a long time now are the most important section of the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie, if you're not a Marxist, or familiar with that terminology, is like the highest echelon in society, the top group that really kind of run the economy and therefore society. And like the tech bros are the richest people in the world now. Like they kind of, because of their technological prowess and control, they do really run a lot of the world economy. It used to be like, you know, the financial sector, you know, Wall Street, the biggest banks, they used to be, you know, the biggest capitalists. Like, you know, before that it was, you know, your robber barons, like people that controlled industry. They were the biggest tech, they were the biggest like capitalists of our time, or of their era, sorry. And so at the moment it's the tech bros, I find. And so like they're all libertarian, and so like, you know, they've got a lot of resources and they've put a lot of thought. Now they've, you know, created all their successful startups, and they call themselves all, you know, venture capitalists. So they're just looking now to invest in the next big idea. And like, what's better than investing in just like another startup or another company, like when you've got more money than anyone could kind of dream of, is like, you know, maybe, like I said before, and I wasn't being facetious, like, although I was very sarcastic, like create a society that like kind of embodies your political ideology. So like recreate society kind of thing. And so like what you were describing before, Kareem, is like kind of the step-by-step process as how you would do that. And like this Balaji guy speaks very, very like clearly about what the difference is between a network state and a nation state. And like, I think this is actually quite interesting, even though I don't really trust where he's going with it, but like, that's beside the point. What's interesting is he believes that the distinction between a network state and a nation state is a group of individuals that are all of conflicting ideologies, so conflicting outlooks on life, conflicting cultures, conflicting backgrounds, and they're all congregated together in a geographical boundary. So the geography, the bounds in the real world is the defining constraint. But like the ideologies of all these people, they're all just kind of clammed together in this chaotic environment. Now, the network state is a conglomeration of individuals with the same ideological outlook, the same worldview, but it is borderless. It is not bound by any type of geography. And so like there is an inversion there of the ideas of ideological grounding and geography. So the network state is not bound by any geography in the first case, but it is unified by ideological understanding of the world. Now, like, let's like actually look at this from like a real world example. So like 4AS keeps mentioning this place in Honduras, and there is actually a place where this is already happening. So like there is tech bros out there that are like building a city called Prospera, which is in an island off Honduras, so Central America. And like they negotiated, because like this is what I was talking about, like these are multi-billionaires. They negotiated with a sovereign state and was like, hey, see that island over there? We want that. How much? And they're just like, all right, well, here's the price. And they're just like, but we also want sovereignty. So you negotiate with a sovereign nation and say, you've got sovereignty. You give us sovereignty within your boundary. And this is what you were talking about, Kareem, where there's like stages of sovereignty. And so like their sovereignty is only like kind of as an island called Prospera, as a network state, is like only granted to them by an existing sovereign. And so like within the rules, they've like Honduras would have changed their constitution and their like, you know, their legislation to include this place as a separate territory, an autonomous territory within their national borders. So like technically Prospera, this network city, this network state, is protected because Honduras has sovereignty as well. But like they have separate laws. So like, you know, they have a different tax system there. They actually have different like, you know, rules and regulations. So like maybe if they didn't outlaw murder there, maybe you could kill someone in the network state if like, you know, it was justifiable or something. Who knows what their legal code is. But like for the most part, as libertarians, they're probably just worried about like not being taxed or something like that, because that, you know, imposes on somebody else's like freedoms and liberties and all that type of stuff. But like they're setting this place up. And like while I have been kind of very negative about this, is like when you look at like their video, which is like this like fancy real estate video that's like showing off this city in Honduras, it's basically just like a scene from Jurassic Park where you have like all of these like South American and Central American like workers, and you have like one rich dude who wants to set up Jurassic Park, and they're all like working in like, you know, a hurricane and like, you know, under slave-like conditions, trying to build some like, you know, gleaming perfect like city for all of these rich people from Silicon Valley. And like they're doing all the hard work and they're serving them like slaves and servants and stuff like that. And they just like fly in from Central America whenever they feel it, or like Texas or something like that. And they're just like, oh yeah, progress. It's looking really good. You guys are doing a great job. Keep going, Hondurans, kind of thing. And like, it's like they've really detached from reality kind of stuff. And like, you could only set this stuff up if you were like a multi-billionaire and you got together with all of your billionaire buddies to do this. Like they're basically just like, yeah, creating private cities, but it's like based on this libertarian ideal. And so like when you look at another version they have called Praxis, which isn't off the ground yet, like the Honduras example, Prospera, like what they're doing is they're like, we're going to set up this community soon. Like we're going to set up this network state, buy in now. And so you buy citizenship. Like they've already, you know, raised like $400 million or something like that. And there's like there's like a few thousand citizens already enlisted. They've already bought their like citizenship here, and they're just pooling their money together. And so like when, you know, they talk about like, you know, oh, you know, they're all ideologically aligned. Yeah, they're ideologically aligned because they're all rich enough to kind of buy into this thing, and they want to kind of exit society and go live in some little paradise somewhere where like they're detached from reality. But like the initial stages of this does appear online. And so like they start to come together, they have chats, they associate with one another, they buy citizenship, they might set up their own cryptocurrency, as you were explaining before, Kareem. They might have like basically a blockchain way of like figuring out like kind of the day-to-day kind of administration of this society. And then they're supposed to start meeting up in the real world as well, because they transfer from the digital realm into the real world. Now, the city examples that I've talked about are like the exiting society example that 4AS was talking about before. But like the other avenue for doing this is like just doing it online. Then you start to like basically populate areas within existing network states, and you buy real estate in the real world, and like you start to like concentrate in certain areas. So like, let's just say you started a network state of all these like-minded individuals that was set up by a founder. The founder is really important. Okay. It's very like colonial in a way. Like when the Europeans first went across to America, you know, they were like founders that went over and started colonies over and new states in America and stuff like that. But the founder is really important, and then everyone congregates around the founder, and then they're supposed to kind of exit the digital realm in a sense and like start buying real estate in the real world. And they put all their money together and they start buying real estate. And then once this thing gets big enough, then they basically challenge the sovereign nation that they've conglomerated in and say, you need to recognize our sovereignty. Look how big we are. We have an economy. We own this area within your borders. Give us sovereignty. And this is part of like kind of the state, like the plan here. And like Balaji Srinivasan, he is like, he describes this in great detail kind of thing, and others. But like, this is kind of the plan, just to give you a good like kind of overview of what this might look like.
The part that I'm hoping to unpack in more detail is, to what degree does someone have a right to exit society? Now, my level of thinking, that sounds complicated.
No, keep on going.
Yeah. So look, okay, let me bring it back to the other end of the scale. Like my thinking is, and this could be controversial, but probably is. Like, if someone decides to they don't like society anymore. They want to go live off the land. You know, they feel self-sufficient enough that they know how to hunt, they know how to fish, they know how to build their housing, whatever they want to do. They're like, screw society, I'm done with you guys, I can do it better myself. Yeah. Now, to me, I don't have a fundamental issue with that. Like, if they're not impacting on anybody else's sort of way of life or anything like that, I feel like intuitively, I mean, I could be wrong, but intuitively, it feels like people should have a right to do that. Like if again, provided you're not hurting anyone, you're running around, like swinging axes at people or anything like that.
Get him.
Like, if you want to go live off the land, go do your thing. But where I landed with it was the degree to which you are self-sufficient probably has some sort of influence over the degree to which you want to exit society. Now, if or you feel comfortable sort of exiting society, so there's an element of agency involved. Like, if you're sick or you're frail or for whatever reason you're not able to work, to some degree you're reliant on the state. Like, you're reliant on the state for redistribution of income, for access to healthcare, for access to education, for a whole bunch of things. So there is some degree of reliance on the state, and someone who chooses to shun the state theoretically shuns the support that the state offers as well. Yeah. So that feels like a fair trade-off to me. Like, if you don't want to be a part of us, like, you can't expect our support going forward. Which is where the capitalist kind of the aspect of the network state comes into being, because if they're producing something that is of value that they are able to exchange with a sovereign state, all of a sudden it becomes a two-way street, and we can start to set terms of, okay, how much support do you need, what do you have to offer, that sort of thing. Now, the only reason why I sort of have an issue with tech bros deciding to be like, I'm just going to go do my own thing over here, is like my major like reservation around it is, to what degree are you pulling out resources from the world economy that would otherwise be redistributed towards people that actually need it? Like, is this just a tax haven thing because you don't want to pay tax, or like are you still do you still want to be a part of the world? Like, and I think, you know, this is where I wound up disappearing down the rabbit hole with AI, like particularly in my terms of thinking, was, you know, this and I guess empathizing more with the communist, you know, way of looking at things is, you know, instead of, you know, asking the question, like, what we need to have, it feels ethically responsible to consider the other. Like, you know, on some level, we're a part of society. We don't live alone. You know, we are social beings. You know, that's hardwired into us. You know, we do need community. We need connection. These are fundamental aspects of being human. There are people that can live alone. Are they living their fullest life? I don't know. Who am I to judge? Yeah. But I think it's fair to say that for most people across the board, we're community beings. You know, we need to be a part of society, or some society. If we're going to be a part of society, then we need to consider the needs of other people within that society. Now, how much do we prioritize our own interests over other people is going to be different for everyone. So, but where I kind of landed, you know, when I started thinking about, you know, the communist way of doing things is this idea that it is possible if I stop thinking about myself and start being selfish and start prioritizing, you know, the needs of the collective or the needs of the community, that all of us, like a rising tide lifts all ships. You know, all of us could be doing better overall if we're able to prioritize, you know, the needs of the collective. And so I started playing around, and I showed this to you guys beforehand. I started playing around with asking AI about the idea of a communist network state, which I don't know how comfortable you guys feel discussing it, but it felt like an inspiring vision to me. Obviously, you know, some significant hurdles with it, but it felt like, you know, we're headed in a direction where at least the components of what that might look like theoretically attainable on some level. It might not look like a perfect sort of communist state, but there are aspects of it, you know, that you know particularly around distributed decision making facilitated by technology, public ownership of digital infrastructure. You know, there were aspects of it that seemed quite appealing. What did you guys think about that vision?
Go for it, yes. I've been doing all the talking today.
Oh no! Look, yeah, but it kind of the one thing that I will mention about it, and really going back to that marking video that Mr. E was talking about before, like, I think the strongest parts of the aspect of you know, the network state has been when it kind of has borrowed a lot of anti-capitalist rhetoric. So, and I kind of feel like this is what happens a lot with these kind of libertarian states, is that it does, at least in its marketing and what it presents itself as, is borrowing from you know, the sentiment of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And I guess where what you were kind of talking about, like, you know, it creating its own collective commons, it kind of creating what digital Soviets, if you will, like, it was kind of taking that sentiment of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, kind of to the nth degree, in order to kind of make things more democratic. You know, whether in a mutual aid sort of fashion, whether that is even possible, that you can kind of compete with a techno-feudalist, especially if they're in the click of a button creating their own cryptocurrency and, you know, they're creating their own Prospero praxis, whether you can kind of compete on the same in the same way. Whether that's possible, who knows? But maybe, you were talking about before, Mr. E, the whole idea of them kind of collectivizing and at least flooding an area. And then, once they were undeniable, then springing up and being like, hey, you got to recognize that sovereignty. Maybe the communist style, if they're able to convince other people kind of in a Black Panther way, where it's like, hey, these are our ideas. I don't know, here's mutual aid in order to show you that, we're kind of serious with how we wanted to structure things. We will improve society in XYZ reasons. And, then you all collectivize and kind of you become undeniable within a sovereign state. Like maybe it's possible, but you just won't know until you try it.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think theoretically it should work, actually. Like this idea that you can like take the idea of the network state and apply like communistic or socialistic revolutionary ideas and then apply those ideas to this concept of creating like new states out of like a digital experience. Like if what 4IS is saying, like you could collectivize online and then agree by meeting up with each other in the physical realm and start to occupy areas. And then like you grow into such a mass that you're a political force to be reckoned with. And then you can demand sovereignty and stuff like that. Like it's a revolution from the inside, and like a one defined by like on the bounds of property relations. Because like one of the things this Balaji guy talks about in his concept of the network state is like the idea that like it's kind of property that like gives power to politics, especially in the capitalist sense and like in the modern democratic sense. Like, people really only voted when we first started democracies because they were property owners or they were involved in economics. So like you could start like a political movement, as a regular communist or something like that if you really wanted to. But like if you're not part of the economy, then no one's going to listen to you. But like if you owned like a section of a country because you guys all got together and bought up everything, like you have political rights because you own shit, like kind of thing. So like, if you could get a whole bunch of communists to get together or socialists to get together online and then transfer into the real world and start just buying up the place, then like they would just own the political system by default of their existence. And then you could take over like in this network state style. Like it's just, I guess, like the question is like, how much do you use this digital infrastructure to make all of that happen? And like if it's owned by somebody else, how do you do that properly?
Let me answer that question, because I asked Claude how much would it take to get one of these like a communist network state off the ground. The figure that it gave me were a cumulative requirement of $7 to $12 billion over a 15-year development period to support a community of 100,000 to 250,000 active participants.
Yeah.
Now, unlikely you're going to get that in terms of like philanthropic funding alone. But the thought that just occurred to me was, I'd like to believe, that naive optimist in me believes that we are capable of more as a collective than we are as individuals. Yeah. Like when we look after each other, when we've got, when we're all on the same page, when we've got that perfect synergy, that teamwork, that chemistry, when we can align ourselves effectively, that we are capable of more as a group than we are individually. Yeah. So wouldn't it be sort of, the ultimate like demonstration of that, of that idea or that prospect, if it were possible for one of these, communist network states to develop to a point too where they could actually compete with the tech bros and the individuals that are sort of aligned in I guess transactional ways that are dictated by the markets and mutual interests, instead of that genuine level of cooperation and concern for each other and alignment with each other's values. Like, if it were possible for, one of these states to get to that level where it's like, okay, we work together and we built some shit. And now, because we built some shit, we got something to offer. We can exchange value with other states. And the point in time that you can exchange value with other states is the point in time that that recognition of sovereignty starts to become more concrete. Yeah, because you can buy real estate. Like, there is a path towards that physical space. So, just an idea.
Yeah, no, and it's like, you could really pull something off like this in a place like America, because like, there are a lot of like, within the Midwest and like, the old Rust Belts and stuff like that. There are a lot of places which are like struggling and are like almost abandoned by the economy, especially since like, the rise of neoliberalism and stuff like that. Like these whole, towns, cities, almost entire states that have kind of been left behind because of deindustrialization. And so like, property's kind of dirt cheap over there. So you could go up and buy up every house. I remember there was this one point like 10 years ago that someone turned to me and they're like, hey, do you want to buy a house in Detroit? They're going for $1 a pop. You just need to know an American kind of thing, because like foreigners, it's hard for foreigners to buy property there and stuff like that. And like, let's go buy a street. And I was like, are you serious? Like, is this legitimate? So like, this type of stuff is not too far-fetched if you can coordinate properly. So like, if you can get like-minded individuals together kind of like on the internet and then just be like, hey, let's all move to like, Detroit or something like that, and like buy up like a neighborhood or two, and then like, start to organize their develop infrastructure there, and then demand like, political autonomy, or at least that like, the state negotiates with us and takes us seriously. Like any grassroots organization could do something like this. The concept though of like a communist network state is really, I think would be like the most important distinction between this libertarian network state though, is the idea of who owns the means of production. So like in the libertarian world, like it's all about the founder. And so like the founder, like, sets up this place, and they have to be a billionaire. They need to be someone with resources, because they need to set up their own blockchain, and their own servers that are associated with that. And they formulate their own cryptocurrency, unless they're using one in existence. A lot of the talk is about like setting up your own cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. And like a lot of this stuff takes a lot of resources. So like, I don't see in a communist setting, unless you're going to go out there and like, literally take over like I don't know, a server farm or something like that, like an existing one somewhere. Like, I don't know how you would make like this type of thing happen unless you literally took over a place in like the real world first, because like it costs a lot of money to set up this digital infrastructure, and you got to get access to the digital infrastructure. And this is where libertarians like have all of this sort of stuff set up anyway. Like they control all this existing infrastructure. And to go back, like right back to the beginning of what 4AS was talking about, like these libertarians really think that like, they can separate themselves from the state, but like, they need the state to exist. Like you don't have a network state developing if you don't have like governments across an entire country or across the world that all provide things like you were saying, Kareem, like fiber optic networks. And like, electricity and like, the basics. And like, it's not like these societies can formulate without some government out there and some group of taxpayers and some citizenry that produces electricity and like network, like telecommunications infrastructure for all these people to exist on. They don't exist because they've created their own electricity and like digital infrastructure. No, that's thanks to many societies, many nation states around the world who have done all of this sort of stuff, and they're just piggybacking on that. And that's why like I did start like I said, it sounded like rather, critical and kind of sarcastic the way I was saying it. But like, these libertarian ideals are kind of based on not completely detaching yourself from the existing society, but using that and then justifying your own existence. Like, whereas a socialist revolution or a communist revolution, like, they seek to take over the existing infrastructure and democratize it, or like socialize it, and like, spread it, like have the people take control of that stuff, not pretend like you're independent, like a teenager, pretends like they're independent from their parents and rebels by going out one night, but then returns home at like, 4:00 in the morning because they want to sleep until 1:00 in the afternoon. Like, that's what I feel these libertarians are doing. They're like not taking seriously that if you want to revolutionize society, like, you have to take the reins of everything, not just the nice, pretty stuff, like that allows you to have a nice life. You have to take all of the stuff that makes society function, which is what you were talking about, Kareem, which is a lot of work. Like, a lot of things have to come together. People have to come together.
Can I ask you, and this is probably a limitation in my understanding, like, is it impossible to get a communist society off the ground without taking anything over? Like, is it possible to role model a way of living which grows organically and is attractive enough to the people and self-sustaining enough that it gains enough traction by itself, where, like, it's not necessarily like a revolution per se, it's more attraction rather than promotion.
Right. Well, like, if you could find an area that hasn't been basically carved up by and laid claim to by an existing sovereign nation, let's just say that patch of land exists somewhere in the world, you could go there and like live in the forest and like, build a hut, and like, if you guys can all live off the land, then you could live a communist way because everyone contributes, and everybody does something and everybody takes something, and it's like, but like, if you want to take over an industrial society because you have expectations about living with a certain standard, like post-industrial standard of living, then like, you need to take that society over and run it in a sense that it like aligns with your ideals about how you think society should be run.
Also, I would probably add to that, and this is going over history, and I'm probably doing it in broad brushstrokes, but the Soviet Union is a classic case of this, and probably is Trotsky's strongest point for permanent revolution. And you need to overthrow everything within the globe, because the Soviet Union went within itself. It retreated to the Eastern Bloc, and Stalin and the Soviet Union were basically socialism in one country, and eventually, capitalism and the global order chipped away until the Soviet Union fell. And you ask, is it possible to do anything without taking over the means of production, taking over and creating a new kind of society? Well, no, because I guess somebody who's in power, if somebody is going to go up and challenge them, they're not going to be like, oh, I've been in the business for 250 years, about time somebody else takes over. Like, they, once you have power, you're not going to let it go lightly. So because of that, that's where, by all means, with what you were suggesting before, Kareem, if there was a network state that was able to get off, like a communist network state that was able to get off the ground, and it got to the stage that it could challenge the other network states, I would say that's probably in the territory of Trotsky's permanent revolution. Maybe the people that are the masses that are in the other nation states are like, oh, well, this communist network state sounds pretty good. Let's do what they're doing. But then we're then going back to the whole concepts of seizing the means of production and whatnot. And I feel like you end up, therefore, leading to permanent revolution and creating the new communist society. So, Yeah, go for it.
Can I draw this parallel? Because Mr. You were making the argument that the libertarians are essentially relying on the state in order to support themselves until they're at a place where they are capable of having the sufficient resources to be able to exit society. Yeah. So in some respect, you're reliant on someone else's work in order to get yourself to a place where you're self-sufficient. I guess the seizing the means of production. The reason why I've got a kind of intuitive resistance to it, I think, is because it just sounds as though someone else has done the work and then you just rock up and you just take it, like. And like to what extent are you allowed to do that, as opposed to say again, this is where my naive idealism is really showing, because in my head it's like, hang on, if you've got something to offer, then we can make an exchange, and I get that power doesn't quite work that way. Like, if you've got power, you're probably not going to let it go, particularly if you've got land and especially when it comes to sovereignty and that sort of thing. But at the very minimum, it just feels like you're supposed to rock up to the table with something. Like, it's I could be wrong. Like,
no, I get the sentiment. Like, if somebody else has worked for something, like, why do you just like come in, like, basically with force and like displace them or dispose them of like what they've worked on, kind of thing. But like that's why I like talking about the example of Prospera, because like you like when you look at their real estate video, like, it's quite telling. Like, it's this sexy kind of like, come and play at our fucking golf course and come come invest here. Like, minimum investment buy-in was like $150 million, might I add. But come and invest here, and like in our wonderful city of Prospera, where we have our own tax regimes, and like you can set up your business and your startup, and like it's an entrepreneurial like kind of wonderland. And like in the same video, you just see like all these Hondurans like standing there waiting on these people, like holding the glasses for them, and like when they're like doing the drone shots, all the construction workers are like all Hondurans and stuff like that, like slaving away trying to make this real, like this fantasy world come to life. And it's just like, well, who's really building that world? These people that just like have money, which is like a figment of our imaginations at the end of the day, which like, coerces people into doing stuff because they need to buy stuff to survive. So they've just purchased these Hondurans to build this like oasis for them in the middle of the ocean. And like, they'll let those Hondurans hang around to wait on them hand and foot while they live in a libertarian kind of paradise. It relies on people to like do all of the work and to like build this place. Like, real people put that together. Like, if you looked at it like from a very objective and like materialist like standpoint and said like, who really built Prospera in this, like in Honduras? It's the Honduran people, not the tech bros. They weren't out there like pouring concrete and shit like that and waiting on people. So like, if you argue that like, taking that from these poor tech bros who set up that city, like, did they really set it up? Or did they just like manage it because, like I said before, they've got billions and billions of dollars, and one of them had an idea one night and then called up all their friends and were like, holy shit, let's buy an island somewhere. And then it's like, I know, I'll call Honduras, like, kind of thing. And then they poured their money into that. Like, does that justify like you not being able to take it off them? Because legally, in the system that we have, if you purchase something with money, then like you have rights over it. And like, but like what we're talking about here is like where morality and like legality really sits. And in the bourgeois system, it's based on like private property rights. I bought it, it's mine, I own it. But like in reality, maybe the Hondurans really should own that. They built it. And like, maybe it's justifiable then, if you think of like like, you know, if you go to the back to and like smash the assumption on like what really is ownership and like who really kind of should control something, like legally, morally, maybe someone is justified in taking it off a bunch of people who really had no claim to it, but exorbitant amounts of cash and a couple of ideas that they had when they were off their face one night at a party in Silicon Valley. Like, I don't know. Like, it's, I know what you're saying. Like, really, if you look at it on the surface level, like, well, yeah, they funded it. They put it together. It was their capital that made this thing come to life. So, like, they should have claim to it, kind of thing. But, like, you know, just because, like, for an example, right, when the people that overthrew the kings and queens, the monarchs that used to rule the world, when they overthrew them and set up what we have today, like bourgeois society, like they didn't just burn society to the ground and build it up again. They overtook the current system. So like all the work of all the monarchs and the kings that came before them in setting up society and structuring society and building cities and, you know, filling out the landscape and all that sort of stuff. They didn't just like burn it all down and start again. They used that existing stuff that somebody else built and then went on with their new way of running society. So like it wouldn't be the first time in history that somebody forcibly took something off someone else and then just like, you know, use that as a basis to move forward, kind of thing. So like it happens. It happens. But like, you know, you have to kind of fundamentally kind of ask, like, okay, morality in our society is based on property rights for the most part. It's actually a very Roman thing. Like we get a lot of our law, our judicial system is based around Roman law and like property relations and stuff like that. So like, just because you own something, do you have the like on paper you own it? Do you have the rights over it? Like, and like a socialist, I guess, and a communist would argue, no, you don't actually.
Here's I don't know, probably a more dystopian way of thinking about it, but I've heard the argument made that you don't own something you can't defend.
Right. And like the world used to be very much like that, right?
Yeah.
And like we're actually going back towards that sort of stuff now, might I add.
Yeah, just defending from a legal perspective.
Yeah. Defending from all perspectives.
Battles are fought in court these days instead of on the...
Yeah.
We're probably, in that instance, we're going back to a time where the Second Amendment, where the right to bear arms probably made sense.
Yeah, because you got to defend yourself even against your own government.
Like if you... Yeah, I mean... You know, if you want to live in a house, like... I mean, I'm sure this was true once upon a time, but... You know, if you want to claim ownership to a house, like you got to sit on the front porch with a shotgun.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
yeah, and that's like the laughable notion of these like network states to a certain degree. Like, you know, they assume, these people, that like the only real ideological battle out there is like, you know, in America, where like it's between left and right and stuff like that. So like, you know, and like their state is evil. So like if the private sector took over the state and government, like everything would just work better. But they forget there are other states out there in the world. And like if you go and set up some like, you know, city in like Central America or Greenland or something like that, and you like just like what you said before, Kareem, like you take all your billions of dollars out of America. Like let's just say all of these tech bros exited and they destroyed the American economy while they exited society, kind of thing. And the American state, basically, as we know it today, just fell to pieces. Let's just say that happened. And they're off living in like Greenland or something like that, like, you know, living it up in like basically like a gated community, and they're protected from the chaos as America like falls into chaos, kind of thing. Like 4S is right. Like what's stopping like Russia or China or something and be like, fuck, that's a great city. I'll take that. Thank you very much. Like these people think that like the only problem is like, you know, the private sector versus the state. But it's just like, no, there are other states out there that might be a danger to you. And if you can't, like you said, if you can't defend like your claim to something like in the world, which is still, you know, it's rather militaristic, the world, like split along like different lines between like major powers and stuff like that. If you can't defend it, like, you know, what are you going to do? someone is going to come in and strong arm you one way or another. And so like, that's why I do really think that this is a bit of a fantasy, this type of stuff. Like, as long as the American state holds strong, and like it is very strong, the American state, especially from a military perspective, like these people can live out their fantasies, because like if anything happens, they'll just be like on the phone to like someone like Trump, and they'll just be like, you know, someone's trying to attack us. They'd be like, I'm sending the bombs, like kind of thing, you know.
I guess the part that I probably want to emphasize is that like the vision that you're describing of, you know, Prospera and Praxis and you know what the tech bros are doing with what looks like on the surface, I mean, you know, the libertarian sort of ideals is one version of the network state. It might not comprise the entirety of everyone who sort of, you know, aspires to a network state. Like there could be different versions of this. And one of the things that Gemini did actually come back to me in support of it was saying that if we've had the opportunity to sort of trial different systems of government, see what works, what doesn't, you know, but I guess particularly in terms of, you know, at least as I see it, you know, there seems to be this the hurdle of once you acquire physical property and you're in the process of seeking sovereignty, you know, even if it's to varying degrees of sovereignty, like, you know, what works and what doesn't in terms of how we govern ourselves has the potential to influence other nation states. So they might look at, you know, say, one version of a network state, say, this one actually worked out really well for them. Perhaps we can implement something similar. Or let's just say, you know, distributed decision making, or you know, like a digital platform that facilitates, you know, distributed decision making. If they're like, hang on, this actually works out really well for them, maybe that's something we can integrate into our society. So in terms of being able to pioneer different social experiments, different ways of doing things, that again is that rapid iteration. I hate the term, but it has value, because it's such a startup kind of like corporate way of looking at things. But it has value. It's like, okay, we tried some shit, it failed. The part that it probably doesn't quite capture is how spectacularly did it fail, and what were the consequences of that failure.
Yeah, but like, you know, for people like this,
isn't fully captured by rapid iteration. But the idea of being willing to try new stuff, you know.
Yeah, look, I'm all for experimenting. Like, but like, I think they have like a warped understanding of their autonomy. Like, so experiment, try a new governmental structure, have a crack, go for it, you know. You know, see how this works and see how that works. But like, don't believe that like you can exist outside of society. Like, if you really rely on it to survive, like and massively, like, you know.
So what do you think of the idea that different people rely on society to different extents?
Well, like, I would say that is true. Like, what do you mean?
But well, I mean, like, you know, if you sort of bring that back to, I guess I'm bringing up this idea of, you know, like, how much of a right do you have to exit society? And to what degree can you exit society? Like, if you want to be a recluse within society, but you pay taxes, you like theoretically you've got that right. You don't have to talk to anyone. If you like, just screw everyone. You know? So if you're unemployed and you're reliant on the state to some extent, then look, I mean, you can't really exit society because you know, like, the degree of agency you're afforded in that situation is less than the next person who actually has the means to be able to look after themselves, or you know, even like cooking and cleaning for yourself, like on some fundamental level. Like, we all differ in terms of our ability to be able to look after ourselves. I'm drawing the correlation between that and the degree to which, a person feels like they have a right to dictate how much of a society they want to be a part of. Because I feel like that's going to fall on the spectrum as well. Like, not everyone wants to be actively included in every single aspect of society. Like, some people just want to carve out their own little corner of the universe, and that's good enough for them. I've got my friends, got my family, I got, so, I'm just seeing this libertarian network state as being, an extreme version of that. That's again, facilitated by access to capital.
Pretty much.
Which not everyone has.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what's driving this. Like these guys have the resources to do this, and so like they've got a bit of money. Like the guy that came up with the idea for Greenland, like went up to Peter Thiel, who's like one of the tech bros, one of the wealthiest men in America. And like he was like, Peter Thiel was like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea actually. Like, I'd invest in that. Here's $50 million to go figure it out. Like, these guys aren't like, holy shit, I want to revolutionize society kind of thing. Like, for the most part, like sometimes they're just like, sounds like a sick idea. Here's $50 million. Like, fuck. Where's my $50 million?
But I like that image of it's like, that's a cool idea, man. Here's some pocket money.
Yeah, like, I know, right? Like,
but I'm sure I'm positive that there would be plenty of like good examples out there of someone who had a good idea, like a revolutionary idea.
Yeah.
Went and sought philanthropic funding and was able to get, I don't know, like some sort of medical treatment or something off the ground, or some research idea, or some scientific breakthrough. Like I don't have any examples on hand of that. But
No, it happens. It happens. Like, like in the Renaissance, like there was great art made by, very like amazing artists who were patrons of like a very wealthy, like aristocrat or like noble family. And it's just like, okay, that society was able to produce this one genius painter like per generation because like a noble family had enough money and resources to give them a home and say, you paint this chapel and don't stop until you do, kind of thing. And like we all marvel at that today, but like we would look at that society and be like, well, they only could produce one amazing artwork, like, or artist per generation. Like capitalism produces like thousands and millions of them per generation. And like maybe another social structure that doesn't rely on like, the philanthropy of some douchebag in Silicon Valley will produce even more art for like all of us to enjoy. Like anyone could be an artist. I think like, I hear what you're saying. Like, there's probably a lot of good that has come about of some rich person being like, fuck, that's a fantastic idea that would be really good for a society. Here's $20 million. But like, if that is the way to get access to really good ideas and put them on the ground in society, what I question as a revolutionary is that the best way to get to those results? And I would say fundamentally no.
Look, it's the issue with that is that on some level I feel like the merit of ideas should be able to stand by itself. So on some level I feel like good ideas should rise to the surface and one should naturally fall away. The reality of the situation is not all good ideas get to see the light of day. Not all people with good ideas know the right people or are able to speak into the right ears or get enough attention from the people that have money. And the people that have money don't have enough attention to go around to take a look at all these ideas and evaluate them on sort of, their own merits. So, there are issues with it. Do you have an alternative way of doing things? Or?
Yes. We revolutionize society. We seize the means of production, and we we lay waste to the bourgeois system. Okay. Like that is my fundamental answer to like these types of problems that we're speaking about today. We have a bunch of rich people who think they can exit society, and we're speaking about ethically, like physically, can you do that? And then does this system produce good ideas and be able to fund it or like support it in a way which nourishes talent that's out there? And to answer both of those questions, I think the system has its limitations and produces these type of results. And if you want different results, you need a different system. And so that's why I'm a revolutionary, kind of thing, at the end of the day. And let me just add, because we've been speaking about just taking stuff from other people. I've said it before in a stream, and I'll say it again here for the record. I'm all for letting these libertarians pump billions of dollars into setting up network states and new cities and stuff like that, because once the infrastructure is laid down, it only takes an organized revolution to lay claim to all of that. And you need capital to do this stuff. Capitalism, the socialist revolution, the communist revolution doesn't come out of nothingness. It comes out of a fully developed industrial society. And so if these guys have got too much capital and they don't know what to do with it, then spend money, create some beautiful cities. Please set up your network states. We'll be waiting. We'll be waiting, right? Hey, as soon as it collapses.
We're watching you. Getting access to a military.
One day.
Okay, and with that, gents and everyone that's listening and watching, that's probably a good way to bookend this episode. And of course, the last cap off the rank is what's that synthwave art? So who wants to have a crack at this one?
They look like tech bros to me.
Yes, they do. Your prompt was to the AI was please depict your most outrageous Silicon Valley libertarian douchebag and put them in synthwavy clothes. Was that the prompt? It was, wasn't it?
So the prompt was the billionaires and tech bros living out a libertarian fantasy in the global south.
Oh, so close.
You know what? You actually were. And with that, everyone, thank you for tuning in, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And of course, Kareem, thank you for joining today.
Pleasure, as always.
And to sign us off, I'll give it to you, Mr.
Thank you very much, 4IS. And yes, thank you, Kareem. Thanks for joining. A pleasure as always. And as 4IS said, everyone, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. And until next time, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.